Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, the long awaited final conclusion to the epic 29-year-old saga. In The Final Reckoning, our friend Ethan Hunt returns once again to battle an AI that has intentions to blow off nuclear weapons, potentially destroying 11 of the world's largest cities and causing what one character describes as an inevitable world war. The scene is set, the energy in every scene is there. Returning characters such as Luther, Benji, and Paris make returns. Despite there being a relatively lack of action in the first three quarters of the final reckoning, there is enough energy and direction in every scene that you can feel it. You can just feel that this lack of action is building to something big. Unlike pretty much all big blockbuster movies of the 80s and 90s, there's hardly any shootouts in the entire movie. I also don't recall a single car chase, which was, of course, strange. It felt like something was missing. Something was missing for at least the first three quarters of this 170-minute movie. At least it would normally feel like something is missing. But director McCrory manages to hold out a level of tension and engagement for the first three quarters of this 170-minute movie, and do so by doing very little, proving once again that McCrory was the perfect man to direct this film series. The Final Reckoning would be disappointing as an action movie, and you could hardly call it an action movie if that lack of action continued all the way to the end. But you got the sense that all the energy, all the lack of big action scenes, lack of shootouts, and lack of car chases was leading to something big. And boy, it definitely led to something big. Something I don't think I've ever seen done before, at least this well, in an action movie. A huge aircraft fighter scene where our friend Ethan Hunt is hanging off the edge of this thing without a parachute. The scene lasts a solid 15 minutes in total, but is intermingled by cutting to other scenes, which builds the suspense of Ethan Hunt hanging off the edge of this aircraft even further. Whilst, of course, there are similar aircraft scenes like this in James Bond movies and other series, what makes this aircraft scene stand out is the incredible cinematography, the huge amount of speed the aircraft shows, alongside the incredibly realistic looking maneuvers the aircraft displays. In short, as bombastically frightening as this aircraft sequence looked, it seemed like it was real. And heck, just maybe Tom Cruise, who's known to not shy away from doing his own action stunts, was actually possibly hanging off the edge of this aircraft the entire time. Now, if he was, I imagine there must have been some damn good CGI covering some sort of harness that was securing Tom Cruise to the aircraft. And the level of danger on display in this sequence was so immense that you would have to be crazy to think that Tom Cruise was in any way actually hanging off the edge of this aircraft. But hey, that just goes to show the incredible bravery, commitment of a movie star who does his own incredible stunts. If there's a scene that looks so insane that it almost looks implausible, the wow factor of such a scene hits another level of amazing. If you think the actor involved just might actually be crazy enough to be actually doing the stunt. And heck, when this 4K Ultra HD release of The Final Reckoning comes around, I'm definitely picking it up just to find out how these incredible action scenes are made and how much Tom Cruise was actually involved in this aircraft fighter scene. And I suspect it's a lot more actual stunt work than you might be expecting. Although with Tom Cruise, we all have learned to expect nothing less than anything and everything. Anyway, aren't movie stars just badass? Just badass when you know the actor behind the camera is also a badass in real life? Tom Cruise has never missed the muscles like Schwarzenegger or a badass like Bruce Willis. But despite his underwhelming stature, Tom Cruise over the years has managed to show a level of heroism and inspiration where you're like, yeah, that guy's a star. That guy's a badass. And I think a lot of that comes from who Tom Cruise is as a person. The fact he has a huge amount of enthusiasm for making action movies. The fact he does all his own action scenes. The fact that he cares about making movies to entertain people, unlike a lot of other celebrities who seem to be more interested in pushing their own political opinions in people's faces and being condescending to those with different opinions. Not to say political activism is a bad thing in itself, but when you're a movie star, when you're supposed to be drawing in a box office and creating great art, is rattling off your political ideology really something so important that it takes precedence over your main job to draw in and welcome as large an audience as possible? Anyhow, I heard one reviewer I respect, the critical drinker, say the movie just ends with no climactic moments that symbolize the culmination of what is supposed to be the end of a massively important and big film franchise that at this point has lasted almost 30 years. Well, from what I saw, the final reckoning ended just fine, right after maybe the biggest and arguably the best action sequence I have ever seen in any action movie. And considering I've seen John Wick, Terminator 2, and Die Hard, that's a big and bold statement, but a statement that is hard to argue with. Anyhow, the final movie in this franchise did the Mission Impossible franchise justice, capping it off with the most awesome sequence you could ever imagine in any movie, as well as paying dues to all the characters and movies of years past. The classic Mission Impossible music once again returns in the final reckoning. We hear it again once the credits roll, and after a slow build to an incredible final sequence and epilogue, all I can say as the credits of Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning rolled was, I want more. I want to see more Mission Impossible. Tom Cruise recently stated he wants to make movies up until his age 100. And considering Tom Cruise is presently 62 years old, we're lucky enough to have another 38 years of Tom Cruise making big blockbuster action movies. And if that's the case, I gotta think this might not be the final reckoning after all. Anyhow, Mission Impossible is doing pretty well financially, earning $450 million globally against an apparently $400 million budget. Despite that massive sum of money, I think it's money well spent. And I gotta think the final reckoning might break even. Because it deserves to. It really deserves to. Because I haven't walked out of a movie theater thinking, whoa, what an incredible thrill ride I just experienced in a long time. This movie's got my adrenaline pumping, and this movie was awesome. Not necessarily The Godfather, of course, but it's an action movie. It does what action movies are supposed to do, take the audience on a thrill ride. I felt like I was on a roller coaster by the end of this movie. After having watched years of Marvel movies from 2008 to 2020, I'm finally over that fake phony stuff. There's just something about CGI that looks fake and so phony. On the contrary, a real action movie with mostly real stunts done by a genuine and real authentic movie star just adds a whole level of thrill to a movie that all this fake ass amateur CGI stuff just can't add. Tom Cruise displays a level of enthusiasm for his movies and for his audience, and that enthusiasm reflects in you as a viewer, which is another reason I think you feel good watching The Final Reckoning and you feel good when the credits roll. And Tom Cruise is a movie star who makes big blockbuster action movies, and you can't but respect an actor who actually shows dedication and enthusiasm for his craft rather than all these entertainers who constantly belittle and bemoan the occupation they chose to do. Oh, and before I go, I didn't even mention one thing. Maybe the number one thing that makes the final reckoning so incredible. IMAX. Yeah, this movie was filmed for IMAX. And I had suspected if there was one movie that was worth watching in IMAX this year, it would be Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. And boy, did it deliver. I definitely think the extra big size of IMAX pays off big time in The Final Reckoning. And the action sequences, especially the final fighter plane sequence, was just that much more awesome, grand, and spectacular in IMAX. Anyhow, I'm surprised The Final Reckoning hasn't made $1 billion already, because this movie was made for the movies. This was made for IMAX, and it certainly delivers in that regard. I know most of us probably don't live close enough to an IMAX. I myself live 2 hours away from an IMAX. But if there's one movie worth traveling 2 hours or more to see in IMAX, it is The Final Reckoning. So take an aircraft if you have to. Get to an IMAX theater. You won't regret it. But at the very least, see it in theaters, because some movies are made to see in theaters. And The Final Reckoning is definitely one of them. I can't say you would enjoy The Final Reckoning at home on Blu-ray or 4K as much as you would in the theaters, or especially on an IMAX screen. Edit. I know at the time of the release of this video, the theatrical run of The Final Reckoning is in the past. However, much like Avatar: The Way of Water's recent IMAX re-release, I suspect The Final Reckoning will also be re-released for IMAX theaters at a future point. And if so, I encourage you to check it out. It's not like The Final Reckoning would be a bad movie in 4K on your home theater, but as this movie was specifically filmed for IMAX, I can't honestly say you would get the same incredible experience watching The Final Reckoning on a home theater as you would get in an IMAX theater. And with next year being the 30th anniversary of Mission Impossible, it just might be the time that The Final Reckoning and the whole collection of Mission Impossible films are re released in IMAX for you all to enjoy. Anyhow, cheerio. This message will self destruct in 5, 4, 3, 2,